Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's meeting of the Planning and Development Board. Just for the avoidance of any doubt, we are now broadcasting live on the internet. So please be aware in case you might wish to address later. For those of you who don't know, the evacuation, we're not expecting the fire alarm or any other alarm to sound this evening. If it does, that would imply that it's a real emergency, so please leave the building by the nearest safest exit, which is likely to be that door. If for any reason we can't use that, it'll be the civic suite that you enter the building by. Please go to Assembly Point G on the car park, which is just over there. Please do not simply leave and go home, because otherwise Mr. Tobin will have to come and find you. So the fire brigade aren't running around looking for people aren't here. We have no apologies from members away or on official council business. Does anyone have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests that they would like to disclose? The next item on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting of the board held on the 11th of April. It's been proposed. Thank you very much. I will sign them after the meeting. Members, with your forbearance, I would like to bring forward the item for Peel House application number 155 to the first item on the agenda, because we have a number of people in the gallery here to hear that application on its own, and I'd rather deal with that one first than keep everyone waiting. Are you content that we do that? Yeah. So, in terms of speakers, we have two speakers on that item tonight. The first one is Lee Everett, and secondly, Mr. Ian Ritchie. Lee Everett, if you'd like to take the speaker's chair, whilst Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you just give me a couple of minutes to move through previous items so we can get to Peel House, which is here. Let me just run through the slides first, Mr. Chairman, and then I'll tend to sum up on the written report. Most of these slides are illustrations of paper copies that you have in your agenda, but what we have here then is the site outlined in red, as you can see here, with Witherley Road at the top, and Nursery Road at the bottom here with the cul-de-sac end here. You can also see the numbers of the houses which are referred to in the report, 37, 39, 40, 36, and the Witherley Road ones as well. Then the application, as you can see here, is described in the report, a new house, plot number 1, and the extensions to the house, Peel House, as you can see here, form plot 2. Again, the numbers of the houses there are illustrated so that you can see where you are. Again, the end of the cul-de-sac here is here with the access on the corner, as you can see there. That's a photograph of the actual access as it is at present. And in terms of the houses, this is the new house, front elevation here, which will be facing 39. Again, illustration there, and also, sorry, if I go back, that's the extensions to the property here, as you can see here, the proposed side elevation. If I go back, you'll see that the side elevation here was the larger extension to the property. I'll leave that one up, Mr. Chairman, because that probably is the best one that the members should be hearing. You'll see from the report, Mr. Chairman, this is a much amended scheme, and we now have the proposal which is in front of you now from the original. It's been in for a couple of years. It's been amended over a large number of times, a large number of amendments, to see if the applicant could overcome objections. The report is extremely comprehensive, and I don't intend to go through it. Needless to say that we've had a high number of representations, as you can see from page 5E96, and the case officers outlined or bullet pointed all the objections that have come in under certain issues. And then he has gone through them in some detail in the remainder of the report, Mr. Chairman. I don't intend to go through those at all because the position hasn't changed on any of those items from our point of view. As members will have read from looking at the report, there was an outstanding response required from the County Council. The County Council has been foremost in looking at this particular application. Lots of the representations have come in as a result of highway issues. The up-to-date information from the Highway Authority, which in fact came in today, literally only about half an hour ago, and that is that the Highway Authority has no objection, subject to conditions. Now that was indicated in the report, Mr. Chairman, and all the verbal information correspondence engagement we had with the Highway Authority, that is to be their likely outcome, and that's now confirmed in writing. They have no objection, subject to conditions. Therefore, Mr. Chairman, I'll open this up to members. Clearly, objectors will retain their position. I acknowledge that. But the issue before the planning board is whether there's a planning reason here for refusal that has the full weight of evidence to support refusal if this goes to appeal. We just heard the Highway Authority has no objection, and that will carry substantial weight in my reckoning and also in an appeal situation. The other matters have been dealt with in the report, Mr. Chairman, and the recommendation is one for approval, as we do not consider there's a substantial planning reason for refusal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Everett, welcome to the Council House.
Thank you.
In a moment, Mr. Tobin will talk through the way of public speaking, but you're well welcome to be here.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Tobin.
Thank you. Good evening. In a moment, you'll be given 3 minutes in which to address the board, as will the other person who speaks on this application. I will tell you when your 3 minutes starts. I'll tell you when you have 1 minute remaining, and then I'll tell you when your 3 minutes is finished. 3 minutes starts. Okay, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Board, we strongly object to planning permission being granted. Proposed development will impact severely on us and our neighbours in Nursery Road. Our main objections are demolition of part of the boundary wall, privacy and amenity, and road access through Nursery Road. Demolition of part of the boundary wall. We still have concerns about the demolition of part of the retaining wall for the new access. The issue was highlighted in 2020 and we have received no explanation. The wall survives as part of the elms currently known as 79A, or part of the convent's original enclosure, and upholds historical importance. Alterations and extensions to the cottage have already begun with the removal of a brick outbuilding. Is this permitted? See image figure 7, page 19. Privacy and amenity to our family home and consequential effects for residents. The new dwelling proposed is in close proximity to our house. We have 3 windows on the side elevation of our house, all which are deemed non-habitable, according to case law. These 3 windows provide daylight and contribute to amenity, and yet it is disregarded by the applicant. Loss of light is flippantly suggested to be insignificant. I argue that it will be significant, as we've never had any restrictions on light or shadowing in our 22 years of habitancy. Road access through Nursery Road. Residents do not want access off Nursery Road, which will result in months of heavy construction traffic and noise. Refuse vehicles still reverse down this road because the access is difficult. Cars have to be moved to allow the refuse wagons to pass. There are lots of vehicles parked on the roadside, contrary to what the report says. The road will be situated at the end of the drives of 39 and 40. Visibility for us is very limited, despite what the applicant says. The plans do not show a large privet hedge to the left of 39's driveway as you face it. This affects visibility when leaving in a forward motion or reversing. The officer suggests that we should exit the drive in a forward motion, but this is not a legal requirement.
You have 1 minute remaining.
For the last 22 years, we have reversed up our driveway without any concern. We feel that amendments made after the deadline have actually impacted on this application. See consultation. In conclusion, none of these reasons are important to the applicant, but they will affect our everyday lives. People should be at the heart of every community, and a new development is not in the best interest of the residents of Nursery Road. The applicant has given us no consideration and has in effect passed on his problems. He could quite simply access the proposed site from Witherley Road.
As a planning board, we urge you to reject this application. But if you are considering passing it, then we implore you to make a site visit as a committee. The 2D plans in front of you are not a true representation of a 3D real life perspective and are only in favour of one sole applicant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Irvin. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Just one from me, Mr. Irvin. I think you mentioned the boundary wall was originally part of the historic convent that was there. Do you have any information?
I have a planning document that dates back to, I think it's the 30s or 40s, that shows the boundary wall to be part of a property called the Elms, which is now represented as the cottage.
Would you mind just sending a copy of that to the to your local councils or to the planning department?
Not at all, no.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So we now move to our next speaker, Mr. Ian Ritchie. Mr. Ritchie, if you could take the chair. Mr. Ritchie, welcome back to the Council House.
Thank you very much, Jamie.
Mr. Jordan.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. I'm sure you're familiar with the process, but as you said for the previous speaker, you'll be in 3 minutes to address the board. I'll tell you when the 3 minutes starts. When you have a minute, maybe, and at the end of the time. Thank you. Thank you very much. 3 minutes starts now.
Thank you, Chairman and members. I should be as brief as possible. As Mr. Brown alluded earlier, this is a very thorough planning report that's been prepared by your officers, and I can see there's a lot of effort gone into that. It's concise and accurate. I'd have to disagree with the neighbour at 39 that no consideration at all has been given to the situation, and particularly with regard to the protection of their amenity, as considerable dialogue has taken place with your officers, resulting in the current scheme that we have now, which meets the council's spatial separation distances. There are indeed 3 windows on the gable, 2 of which are for non-habitable rooms, and one of them is in a room that already has another window facing in a different direction. There are no objections, as you know, now from highways, and I think that without taking up any more of the members' time, I think the planning report before you fully deals with all of the points that have been raised historically. And, I think that's probably all I need to say at this time, unless anybody has any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ritchie. Members, any questions? Councillor Jarvis.
Mr. Ritchie, it says in the conditions to this that no work is to start.
Yes.
I understand that work has started.
I'm not aware that any work has started, I'm afraid. And rightly so, no work should start.
Will you be informing your client?
Yes, I will, yeah. I'll have a word with the client and find out what work, if any, has actually commenced. But I'm not aware of any, and certainly it would not be in order for any work to commence prior to any decision.
Any other questions, ma'am? Just one from me, Mr. Ritchie, if I may. Is there any particular reason why your client would prefer to have the access the way it is rather than onto with your work?
I think that there were some highways issues that were of concern in the intensification, because I think that the visibility and the access into Peel House is not particularly good because of the piers that are at the gateway into the property, and that would involve bringing traffic in past what is the main entrance to Peel House. The situation we have at the rear is very incongruous insofar as the existing brick wall projects out into the road. And I think that we discussed this with highways, and they share our view that in its current form, this is actually something of a safety issue to pedestrians and car users.
Thank you very much. If there are no other questions, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ritchie.
Thank you.
Members of Council, Mrs. Clues has indicated there's more of them should like to speak. Would that speak now or later?
Happy to speak whenever you let me, Mr. Chairman.
Shall we go now?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to speak as the ward member. This application has been going on since 2020, a long time. The applicant has greatly scaled down what he would like, but that is 2 years of the residents sitting, waiting for an outcome that they was not sure about. Any of you that knows Nursery Road, it's not a big estate, 29 objections. I don't think I've seen that many on some of the big estates that they're hoping to get planning through. I'm sure you, Mr. Chairman, must have got fed up of me asking about Peel House. I have also been to a planning briefing where I asked Mr. Brown about it. Mr. Brown gave me all the information that he knew and that they were still waiting for correspondence to come forward. On the 16th of March, this was put before Aston Town Council as a consultee. Aston Town Council refused. I was expecting it to come to Planning Board on April the 11th, but it didn't. And at that time, on April the 11th, officer's recommendation was refusal. Again, I asked you, Mr. Chairman, when would Peel House be coming forward? And you did tell me that it would be tonight, the 9th of May. So when the paperwork came out, I was astonished to find out that it said up to that point, depending on what it was from Warwickshire County Council, recommendation is down to accept this planning application. But then again, I was astonished tonight to find out that Warwickshire County Council had only sent in their report tonight. So what I would like firstly to say to this planning board is I hope you've all been round and looked where this is going to be, look where the exit's going to be, and also looked at the wall. Some people might say, what is a wall? But this wall was part of our convent. And sitting up there, looking at all the residents, you can see that they're concerned. And as a ward member, I'm concerned. So what I would still like to ask this board to consider tonight is a refusal. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Councillor Clues. I have to say, if I had felt like that, I wouldn't have been brave enough to tell you. Councillor Johns.
Thank you, Chair. I think, yes, I've had a look at this many times, and I agree with Councillor Clues that you look at this wall and they say there's a safety issue. The County Council said there's a safety issue with it. That wall has been there since before the houses were built, and the houses were built somewhere 60s, 70s. So it's been there 50 years. It ain't been a problem for 50 years, so why should it be a problem now? And I'm certain that there's been no accidents in that area. And if you look where the access is, to me, it's a little bit of a no-brainer. When you look at it as a 2D drawing, as the one that Mr. Brown had on the screen, it just looks as though it's coming out between two houses. That is not the case. If you look on the inside of the wall, the ground there is 1.5 meters lower than the road. Now, to put that into context, if I stood on the Peel House side of the wall, looking out, Nursery Road would be about level with my nose. But that is the distance that it is down. So how it can be feasible, goodness knows. Because as I say, there's a 1.5 meter difference in heights. And when you look at it in real life, as opposed from a 2D drawing, which is all that's been supplied, it is a totally different way. And if it's to be proposed for a site visit to allow all the members to see what I have seen or what others have seen, I would go with that.
Are you proposing that, Councillor?
Yes, I would propose that.
Thank you. Councillor Durham.
Thank you. I've been keeping a very close watch on this. I think Mr. Lees approached my wife when all of this originally started, and I don't have an interest personally in this now, but I do know the site very, very well, because when I got married, I was actually living there for about 2 months. So I know the situation there. To make sure, I've been back to actually check that my memories are correct, and they are. In my view, the assessment that we've had from the County Council is incorrect. And I don't think that this is a suitable access to that area. I really don't think that it should be allowed to continue. I also think that, in line with some of the other arguments that we've heard today, that wall is of significance. It is the last remaining vestige of the convent. It marks that out really well. I don't think that there is sufficient space there to put in a house without interfering with the neighbours. And I know that when we read through the papers, what I have just said goes against what our minimum requirements are in most cases, but there is an argument put forward, I think, here that instead of 20 metres, it's 13.5 metres. I'm not sure of the exact figures. I've forgotten them tonight, but we are allowing this to go ahead with a reduction in the minimum distance for the house. The access arrangements have been covered by the County Council, but I believe that to be incorrect. And I disagree with our heritage officer who says that the wall is of no importance. I think that it is of importance to the town. I think it should be recognised more. In fact, I would like to see a notice on it actually saying what it is, so that people know that that is the site of the convent, and that is why that is called Convent Close. It's important to the history of our town. And therefore, I would second the suggestion for a site visit for those people who haven't seen the situation. And you really do need to see it from both sides of the wall to understand what we're talking about. On my visit, I only looked at it from the outside, and from the inside I'm going by memory. But I think members should be aware of how difficult that corner is. I think the access for the children to the path is close enough to be of concern. And I think the lack of a path around that corner for mobility, scooters and pushchairs, etc., is not a matter for concern. By their own admission, the County Council have said that there have been no accidents in that part of the road. I would like to see it stay that way. And I think that this is definitely going against that. So I will not be supporting the recommendation to pass this. I would support the suggestion of the site visit if members have not seen the site properly.
So, members, we've had a proposal for a site visit which has been seconded. Do you still wish to speak at this point, Councillor Hayfield?
I would simply say that I would simply support a deferral for a site visit because I'm not aware of this site enough. It's a very full report from the officer, I can grant you that, but I've heard enough to give me concerns to want to be able to see feet on the ground.
Thanks very much. Councillor Jarvis and Councillor Derricks, would you mind if we extend your recommendation for a site visit to include additional information on the historic nature of the wall and the specific need to allow a heritage officer to understand rather more about that, particularly given the issues that the objectors have raised and can provide more information?
Yes, please.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair. Also, is it possible that we can get clarification from County Council how they became how they've come about this report to say that it is acceptable for
We certainly, I believe we have their letter stating out their position and their conditions, so we can certainly circulate that to members. Is there anything else on that, Mr. Brown?
No, I was just going to say, Mr. Chairman, I can circulate that to all members of the planning committee.
Thank you very much. So it's been proposed and seconded that we defer the meeting and arrange a site visit. Can I see those in favour? Any against? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Members of the public, you are more than welcome to stay for the rest of our meeting, but I should imagine you've got sock drawers to sort out and everything else. So if you'd like to leave, we can give you a few minutes before we start jabbering on everything else. So, members, we'll go back to the agenda as printed in the programme, but before we do that, I'd just like to comment that I'm sure you're all aware this is technically a new membership of the board, and since the committee last met, 2 members, Councillor Deakin and Councillor MacDonald, have left us. With your consent, I would like Mr. Tobin to write to both of them, thanking them for their time on the board and their respective contributions. Thank you very much. We now move then to application 687 for 89 to 91 Main Road, Orstry. Teresa Hames has indicated that she'd like to speak. If you would take the chair while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As before, I'll just go through the slides. There's only a couple. Again, these are replicas of what's in the report. Main Road in Osprey is here. The shop is down here so that members can orientate themselves. Flats Lane is at the bottom, as you can see, giving an access into the fields beyond. And then it comes up the back of the properties behind the church, as you can see, to the property that you can see outlined here. The actual building to be converted, I've marked as pool, or the offices marked as pool here, so that you can see where it is in relation to the church and to the main residential property here. The building up here is the conversion, which is referred to in the report, subject to the appeal decision. And as you can see, the access would be the same. The access would be used for both. In terms of the report, Mr. Chairman, then the key issue here is, as you can see from the written report, is the adequacy of the access onto Flats Lane, from Flats Lane onto Main Road here. And you can see the issues that have been raised both by the applicant and by the county council. And that has been ongoing now for some time. In fact, it's still ongoing and has been ongoing for the last 3 or 4 days. In terms of exchanges between the applicant and the Highway Authority. The Highway Authority is still not comfortable with what it sees as increased access as a result of the use of the pool via Flats Lane onto Main Road. The recommendation, as you can see, Mr. Chairman, comprises several bits and pieces. It's not necessarily a straightforward refusal based on highway grounds, because there is support for this type of use in villages and in towns, and there's no reason why it shouldn't be supported in principle. The issue is the scale and nature of the use, and therefore the recommendation recognises that. And you'll see, Mr. Chairman, that recommendation B is that there's an invitation there to perhaps ask the applicant, inviting the applicant to review the proposal, see if in fact its use can be reduced, which may put less pressure on the use of the access onto Main Road and therefore overcome the Highway Authority's objection. And that's basically, Mr. Chairman, the reason for the recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Ms. Hames, welcome to the Council House. As you just heard, Mr. Tobin will explain the procedure to you. Welcome. Thank you. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening. As you've probably heard, and I spoke to the last 2 speakers, you're given 3 minutes to address the board, so I'll tell you when the time starts, when you have a minute remaining, and then a new time.
Thank you.
Time slots.
Thank you. I'm Teresa. I just wanted to give a bit of background and explanation why we're doing this really. I'm a PE teacher for 19 years. I'm also an ex-Great Britain swimmer, so physical activity and sport is really close to my heart. I'm quite passionate, obviously, about swimming specifically. When we started the swimming lessons, we didn't kind of willy-nilly just let's start some swimming lessons. We were trying to do what we thought was provide for diverse groups in our community and tried to get it right with the hours. We realised we perhaps have not hit that exactly right. So we are happy to kind of consider that flexibility, and we'd like some guidance on that if we can. At the moment, we have our lessons on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday between 10 and 2:30. The idea around that being that we wouldn't add to any kind of traffic issues with school drop-offs and pick-ups in the village. And we do them on a Monday and a Friday for mothers and babies, most of them local, a lot of them walk to us. We do understand that some drive as well. And the idea being that those local mothers could also, they can swim with their children, but they also can get some socialisation and health and wellbeing. On a Wednesday, the pool is open just for plus size ladies in small groups, 1s and 2s maximum. And those ladies come to us because they can't necessarily gain access to other facilities because of mobility issues. Because it's a private pool, everyone who comes in a car parks on site. And the idea is we can then be a bit flexible with where they park and making sure they can get in and out of the pool really easily. And then on an evening on a Wednesday and a Monday between 4 and 7, 4 and 6:30, we go out for other groups. So Mondays, our instructor Nat, we asked her specifically to work with us because she can work with disabled families. So family swim, one family at a time, and some of them have a disabled child who come, and Nat works with the family and instructing. And then Wednesday evening, is for our primary school children in the local facility. So parents who work, thank you, parents who work are able to access the facility too. Our idea was to try and make it so it's diverse for the community and they can gain local access, because not everyone can get out from the villages to bigger facilities, and to try and tweak it so it suits the people in the area. I get that we might not have got that exactly right yet. If board members would consider the option where we can continue this kind of discussion and try and tweak it to get it right, we'd be really open to a visit so you can come and have a look and see what we're trying to do, and we can get this right for everyone. Because I'm really passionate that the swimmers don't end up, these different groups don't end up missing out on swimming because we got something a little bit wrong in the beginning. So I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? Just one point for me. It's more, to be honest with you, a comment than a question. Okay. Within the recommendation, the officers are going to contact you, send a reminder to refuse. But within there is, section B and further on is very much an opportunity for us to talk. So I'd like to take up your offer that we do talk and see how far we can go. So we'll be in touch. Great, well done, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you very much indeed. Members, over to you.
With the recommendation, Chair. Second.
All those in favour? Any against? Thank you very much. That's carried. We now move on to application number 695 for Highfield Farm, Farthing Lane, Curdle. And we have two speakers, the first of which is Justin Belgon. Apologies, Mr. Belgon, if I'm not pronouncing that properly. Now, you're speaking to us on Teams, so if we could ensure that we can see our speaker on Teams. But first of all, Mr. Brown, would you like to introduce the report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll go through the slides again, just so that members can see on a larger scale where we are. This is Farthing Lane coming out of Curdworth, and this goes up to the 446 top right and effectively to the M42 motorway. The nearest residential properties you can see down here at the bottom, Ashley Farmhouse and the News cottages, which are here. And then the actual Highfield Farm is hatched here. These are the sheds which I referred to in the report, and the access on Farthing Lane here. And then just a bit more detail, as you can see there, the parking space, sufficient parking space for the property. I don't intend to go through the report, Mr. Chairman. Members will see many of the issues that have arisen, have been similar to cases that we've had elsewhere in the borough, noticeably in Harsel, probably no more than 6 months ago. And as a consequence of that, I do need to draw attention to members on the several paragraphs on the introductory section to the observations in the report, which sets down the background here, which is exactly the same issues that you raised, or that I raised with you when we looked at the Hartsill case. In other words, the planning background is quite important here. What can be included in a C2 use, what can be included in a C3 use as well. That is significant. And then I run through the planning considerations, greenbelt issue, which is there in the paragraph, as a paragraph on that. Bearing in mind the site already benefits from the planning permission for bed and breakfast use, even though it's not in use for that at the present time. And therefore, the other two issues are residential humidity and basically access and highway considerations. And as you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, I don't think there's a sufficient reason for a refusal on planning considerations. And the recommendation is one of approval, subject to a number of conditions which match those on the approval on Hartsill case, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Baldon, welcome to the meeting. As I'm sure you've heard, Mr. Tobin is next, and he'll go through the rules with you. Mr. Tobin.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pronunciation of my surname, I could not have said it better. And thank you to the DS officer for the last minute, sent me the link last minute. I would have liked to have been there, but I have a 1-year-old, a very active 1-year-old. The location plan that was shown there had
to say that you have a 3-minute period, so we don't want to eat into that. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. When you have a minute remaining, and when your time is up.
Thank you. I'm at the Ashley Farmhouse, which is on the location plan. We are fully supportive of enabling young people to live well and facilities to support mental health. However, we have concerns with this development with proximity to our home and other residences, in part as we've been given mixed messages from the developers about risks, safety and security. For example, they've stated that it's outside of the village boundary. If this is important for the facility, then it is not outside the village amenities. It's 2 minutes walks from a children's school and 3 minutes to the local pub, and it backs onto cottages and houses, all of it, whom have shared mixed information about the proposed use of the dwelling. This may not matter, but it has been cited as a factor for locating the facility there. Whilst the impact from transport and cars, staff in the unit may be low, there is a combination of HS2 road closures and increased lorry traffic and the proposed residential development surrounding Kerdworth, which this will add to. We note they will instruct the staff which way to enter the village, but that is not sustainable or realistic. They have stated that it will have fencing and secure windows, and then we've heard it's not a secure facility. Young people are free to come and go. We're not clear which it is, and we have mixed messages. We are aware the company who will run the home have only just established and do not have a track record of running the same type of unit. We are confident about their, capacity to ensure safety? The capacity of CQC or Ofsted to inspect, assess will be limited and infrequent. We've been informed that this facility is headed by a Tier 4 CAM psychiatrist, which includes harm to self and others. And we are aware via the Health Service Journal that there is a serious issue with insufficient placements for Tier 4 inpatient services. Is this a step down or alternative facility? Primarily, we are concerned about safety. We have a 1-year-old child and our property borders Highfield Farm adjacent to the proposed small parking lot. We and other residents are worried that the home will accommodate young people who will have a significant detrimental impact upon the residential amenity because they have one or a number of the factors listed below. have been involved with the police or youth offending teams, display significant antisocial behaviours, have criminogenic factors such as missing from home, gang involvement, fire starting or substance misuse. Will the applicant confirm the home will not be for children described as above? If it is, then security factors, including complaints procedures, need to be addressed. Sorry for the overrun. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Does anyone have any questions for our speaker?
Chair, I was going to say, I mean, there's a sort of a list there of, it's all anecdotal. Is there evidence of some of the reasons you say that you've said about the issues that are going to be there? We've heard this, we've heard that. So I'd just like to know, you know, how much evidence there is that is exactly what's going to happen on site. Possible to find out?
I think the objector was raising fears and asking for assurance that that
that's
was
one of
the
the
case.
But what has he what I was trying to find out is where's he got his information from? Is it anecdotal evidence or has he got proof that it is actual fact rather than
Yeah. Okay. My understanding is these are children, well, actually up to the age of 25 that will have come from tier 4, a tier 4 unit, which is a unit where children or young people will have shown to have been harmful to themselves and to others, and that this is somewhat of a in between or step down area to see whether they could go home. So I think it's really our main concern as a family and the residents is one of safety, really, that the children, well, the young adults up to 25 will have experienced behaviour and what our concerns over safety. We haven't seen anything in the whole process of the application that alleviate those concerns.
Okay, thank you very much.
Members, do you have any other questions? In which case, Mr. Dogon, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Dr. Chaudhry. Dr. Chaudhry, if you'd like to take the chair. Chaudhry, you're very welcome to the Council House. I'm sure you know the rules by now, but we'll go through the process. Mr. Turner.
First, just to clarify, the previous speaker did refer, he apologised for going over time, but he did have 6 seconds remaining, so he wasn't granted any additional time. As you've heard probably now, more time than you guys remember, you have 3 minutes to address the board, so I'll tell you the moment when the time starts, when you have a minute remaining, and then at the end of your time. Okay, thank you. Your time starts now.
Thank you. My name is Dr. Shaheen Yusuf Chaudhry, consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I've been doing this as a consultant from last over 13 years, both in NHS and private hospitals. It's very important. And I run a psychiatric intensive care unit for only psychiatric intensive care unit in whole West Midlands, which was under Moss Stafford, and I run that unit for over 5.5 years. It's very important, Mr. Chairman, and all the board, why we want to set up. I think it's very, very important over here. I clarify our objectives, views also about things. 2019, I came to over here, University Hospital Coventry over here, and somebody was there for who had eating disorder unit. I said there was doesn't need hospital, but couldn't go home, and the person was there for around 128 days, and wouldn't go anywhere in the services. Didn't need a hospital. And I remember going there, seeing that person. And the first thing the young person asked me at that time, Dr. Chaudhry, nobody wants me in this country. That was really touching. That's really important, actually, is what we're looking for, what sort of client group we're looking for. We use a very broad terminology in our planning application. We don't want to go very detailed in a way, because that was not meant to be targeted for the general public. It won't be a psychiatric hospital. It won't be a secure children accommodation under Section 25 of the Children Act. It won't be used for that purpose. Our initial plan was to actually do it for 12 to 18. However, there's an increased need for people when they turn 18, they've been rejected and there's no transition period. So our aim is mainly around to enable have that some sort of time frame where they are not able to go and live independently, having those sort of things then. It will be protected by, it will be supervised by staff, 24-hour staff will be there. They will have the CCTV cameras, will be regulated by CQC, which is regulators, and this is a service which will help community in order to step down, but also help people to go through the process of rehabilitation. They are not criminals, they are not known to youth offending teams, they are not people with drug substance misuse history, they are people with autism and people with anorexia nervosa, people with trauma which they suffer with. So for those purposes, we want to set up this service, and we reduce the numbers to 5 only, and we accept all the conditions as proposed in the report. Lastly, we've been very responsive, and we've been going to parish council, we've gone to different people. We have been actually trying to go and explain if they have any questions, and we've designed things.
Your time's ended.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Bell?
Thanks very much. It's been suggested that these youngsters will have come out of tier 4 beds. First of all, is that true? And if it is, what are the criteria for discharge from a tier 4 bed? And it's been again been suggested these people have been a danger to themselves and or other people.
If just wanted to, I don't want to take a long time. However, under code of practice, under Mental Health Act and under Capacity Act, young people, they are not discharged from hospital if they are risk towards themselves or others, because we are not going to take any people detained under Mental Health Act. They are just informal, and people are not discharged from the Mental Health Act unless they are not risk at all. It's a hospital responsibility to make sure they're safe for discharge, and they have a period of transition period, which includes a safe, smooth transition, which sometimes includes a leave to make sure they have criminalization of the people and everything. That's how it would be. When it's a tier 4, that's where the people they need is for them to just come out, but they're not ready to go home. Their needs cannot be met at home. Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Is there anything else you'd like to say to address the concerns that some local residents had that were largely indicated by our previous speaker?
We're happy to work with the local resident. It's not a service, it's a normal home. They need a normal home. They're not risk to anybody. And there are care homes and children homes which are within the community, which is next to the residents there. There hasn't been any such sort of, in fact, there is actually policy to make sure to promote those things. Then we are, all these companies new, but actually the people who have been working, they are very, very experienced working and managing these sort of children. And application should be based on not just people who are going to run that. It should be solely on what are the accommodation it is and based on the way things are. We understand their worries, and that's why we went to the parish council. We had no objection from them. We attended their meeting also, and we have been very, very responsive. We have actually, soon we get any concerns, any worries from anybody, we've been responding it back with quite detailed responses we have given so far to people, make sure we are very inclusive and very responsive.
Thank you. And I can certainly see from the papers in front of us that there's been a deal of conversation back and forth. Would you be happy to have a further meeting with the people who are expressing concerns if we could arrange that?
I mean, we have already had a meeting with parish council, and we had no objection from parish council. We're happy to have, we offered the planning officer at that time, we're happy to arrange, and we gave a number and email address. If people want to actually, they can actually email us, or we can actually arrange a meeting with them. So far, there hasn't been any sort of attempt from any objector to do that. So what we would be happy to do if that's what will help them to understand the business a bit more. However, it is important is because we are so responsive, we try to keep, I know there's been inconsistencies of what you're saying, but we've been trying to respond to the people's worries and trying to change things as we go along in order to help them to understand, because we are dealing with different spectrum of the people around their knowledge around what we are going to do. And unfortunately, we have to address according to what it comes up, and that's why we keep on changing, as this is sort of a responsive approach.
No, and I'm sure we understand.
Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Members, I'm sure you're all aware that this application site is in my ward, so if you forgive me, I'll speak to you as a local member rather than as chairman for a couple of seconds. I'd like to propose deferment of the application for a site visit, because I think it's important for members to be aware of the specific location and the advantages of the site and the disadvantages of the site. I would also like to take the opportunity for the applicant to have an opportunity to a further opportunity, because they've already had lots of consultation. I think a further opportunity. I've certainly been given a bunch of questions from residents that I'd like to talk to the applicant about, and I think that a deferment for a site visit would allow us the opportunity to do that. Councillor Hayfield?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll second that. What I would say, perhaps of comfort to some of the residents, that I know each of these applications for residential accommodation differs. But when I used to represent Forlongley, I had 3 of them in Forlongley. And the first 2, outrage, village hall, people jumping up and down. Hasn't been any issues with any of them. They've just got on with it. They've just become part of the background of their communities, and there hasn't been all the worries and concerns never materialised. Now, I can't promise it'll be the same here, but I would just say that there's a history of these sort of applications, and they are managed well by and large and without incident. But I'll happily second your recommendation for a site.
Thank you much. Councillor Wiley?
Chair, yes, I support the request for a site visit. Interestingly, knowing the area well, the maps that we're presented with don't actually reinforce the fact that this is right in a developed community, and an established residential community with a school close by. I'm also highly conscious of the fact that the 4097 and Junction 9 isn't very far away. So there will be considerations that I will have, except in that highways have said no objection in terms of immediate road safety. I think there are some considerations around developing HS2 transport plans for the location. So site visit, excellent idea.
Thank you very much. So members, any other questions? Proposed and seconded for a site visit. Can I see those in favour? And any against? Thank you, that's unanimous. We deferred the application for some further consideration. We will be in touch with you to arrange a meeting on the site. Members, we now move on to application 124 for number 12 Austria Lane, Newton. Mr. Barry Hope has indicated he'd like to speak on Teams. Mr. Hope, if you could stand by while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just run through the slides again. These are replicas of what you already have in your paper report. You can see the slide there outlined in the rectangle at the junction of Townsend Close and Austria Lane. You can see number 10, the neighbour's property. Number 12 was in fact the other half of the semi. But as you can see, the proposal is to take down 12. It is in fact taken down already, but to replace it with 2, as you can see here on the plan. And then in elevation form, the 2 that you can see there are provided in the top right-hand corner. As you can see from the report, Mr. Chairman, the Planning Commission has granted only last year, in fact, for the refurbishment of number 12, together with the addition of an additional house, therefore creating a run of 3, as it were. But you can see that number 12 was in fact totally demolished. And then clearly the applicant is now seeking a planning commission to revert effectively to the 3-house solution or 2-house solution on the site. There's no problem at all with this, Mr. Chairman. The plans exactly match the plans that were approved for the conversion in the new house in terms of elevation, parking, access and what have you. I will point out, though, however, Mr. Chairman, this site is inside the development boundary, and therefore of Newton Regis, and therefore, whilst we do have cases where planning permissions are granted for conversions, and then all of a sudden we find the conversion is converted to a new build because the converted property has been taken down or removed or dismantled. In this case, that principle will not apply. The site is inside the development boundary, and therefore there's no objection in principle to new development, as you'll be aware from the local plan, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hope, you are welcome to the meeting. As I'm sure you've worked out, Mr. Tobin will speak to you next, and then we can hear what you have. Mr. Hope.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hope, in a moment, I'll tell you when your 3 minutes is. I'll remind you when you have 1 minute remaining, and then I'll tell you when your time's ending. Your time starts then.
Right. The application, as you say, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah. The application isn't any different than was originally approved. I understand there's been some objections this time. The plan as approved couldn't be constructed off the original building and had to come down to comply with the plans that were proposed. Our client went ahead and did that based on the original architect's scheme. When everything came to light that we had to reapply, we stopped work on site and reapplied. There's been issues with party walls, with highways. We've liaised with all departments to resolve those straight away and are liaising with them to deal with those. There was issues raised about the appearance of the building, but this has been arrived at in discussion with the planning department. And what we now have, which varies in the approval from what was on the drawing view, the elevations you actually showed, exposed eaves and arched heads to windows have been added at the instruction of the planning department. So I'm putting forward that with the changes, this is not any different than was originally approved, and request that it's supported. Thank you. That's all I have to say on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Hope. Members, do you have any questions for Mr. Hope? There are no questions, Mr. Hope, so thank you very much indeed. Members, over to you.
With the recommendation, Chair.
Thank you. It's been proposed and seconded that permission is granted. I see those in favour. Any against? That's carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Hope.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
To applications 261 and 265 for Homestead 82 Main Road, Hall Street. Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members will know about this, so I don't need to go into great detail about the history and background to this. I'll just run through the slides, a couple of slides, so you can see where it is in terms of on the corner of the main road, just in back opposite the site that we were dealing with earlier on with the swimming pool, which is top right. And you can see that there are two parts: the cottage, which is the left-hand side, and the barn, which is to be dismantled and replaced with the two units. What I will say, Mr. Chairman, is that we have been waiting for Historic England to come back on comments, and also in response to that, the applicant has now provided a very, very full list of documentation, specifically as requested by Historic England. That has gone off to Historic England. In fact, it only went off the end of last week. I'm not expecting there to be an objection because Historic England, as you know, have indicated that they support it in principle. It's a question of how it's done and what is retained within the new structures. Those are the key things, and those are all outlined in the documentation which has now come in, Mr. Chairman. So therefore, really, this recommendation that we have in front of you is really an update, and just to keep an eye on this, and we will obviously refer back to you once we get the final comments from Historic England.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Christmas is coming and the goose is getting fat. Will this be done before the winter?
If I was saying, Mr. Chairman, we're not in a position yet to make a formal recommendation, but it clearly the indications historically we're minded to support. In that situation, clearly, as members are aware, there are the standard conditions which are attached to planning permissions, and that is that work has to start within 3 years of the date of the permission. There's no reason why that should not be varied. And in fact, the condition could be that development starts within 12 months of the date of the permission. That's something we can certainly look at.
Members?
Move the recommendation, Chairman.
Councillor
I may be wrong, but I thought we had a subcommittee that looked at historic buildings and things to do with that. Have they been involved in this? And if not, can they be? And should they be?
They certainly have been involved with this specific application, Councillor Bowman. I think it may well be time that they met again.
Can I just mention that I thought that this was to note and to let the rest of the committee know what work has been done so far. So it is an update from that.
So, members, if you are content to note the report and ask the subcommittee to meet again.
Agreed.
Yeah, agreed. All those in favour? Any against? Thank you very much. We dealt with Peel House, so the next application is land adjacent to 15 Curlew Close, application number 246. We have two speakers, the first of which is Linda Roberts. Ms. Roberts, if you could stand by while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me move on. Once again, Mr. Chairman, these are just replicas of what you see in front of you in terms of the paper report. Top right, the location plan edged in red here. Curlew Close, the small cul-de-sac here, going on to the main road here, Osprey Road here, which you can see there. You can also see some of the houses that are either side of Curlew Close, and there is a gap between residential property here, which is where the access is going through. So therefore, if I move across to the layout, you can see the numbers 12, 14, 15, 16, Curlew Close. The curve of that cul-de-sac is here with the access coming off, as you can see, coming into the cul-de-sac, 28 units. Again, some illustrations there of street scenes that the applicant is proposing. In terms of the report, Mr. Chairman, I don't intend to go through the report in detail. However, I do need to point out to you that this is now an amended proposal. As you can see, it's been reduced from 34 to 28 units. It's still all 100% affordable. And the mix is outlined in the report in the proposal section. We have had a large number of objections, as you can see from the report, and objections have come in since publication of this report and the date of this meeting, repeating the matters which are raised actually in the paper copies and in front of you. There are two main issues raised. The first of all is the scale of the development, its location, and secondly, highway issues. In terms of the location, Mr. Chairman, then this is outside the development boundary, but as members will be aware, and as the report indicates, policy LP2, to which this relates, does not exclude development that is directly adjacent to a development boundary. So therefore, this proposal may be acceptable under policy LP2. The fact that it's outside the development boundary is therefore not a reason for refusal. And the report goes through in some detail all the tests and conditions that are set out in LP2 to see whether in fact it can satisfy those conditions. The key one is its size and the impact on the character of the landscape and the character of the village. And that's outlined in some detail in policies LP1 and LP14, which have been outlined in the report. There are other issues there under different policy numbers. So whether or not this accords with the tests in LP2, I'm saying it does not in respect of policies LP1 and LP14, which are covered by LP2. In terms of highways, Mr. Chairman, then you'll know that the Highway Authority has not objected to this proposal in principle. They have been looked at in some detail, the geometry of the layout in terms of the actual width of the road, parking spaces, access widths and what have you. A great amount of detail has gone into that. And the current scheme that you have in front of you is the latest version of that engagement. And as the report indicates, Mr. Chairman, there's still an issue with the Highway Authority in terms of the access into the site, in terms of the potential for parking of on-street parking for cars on the inside of this bend, or indeed the outside of that bend, precluding visibility. That is still an issue, and there's a balance to be held there between highway benefits or planning benefits, and those are outlined in the report in front of you. The key benefit of this proposal, Mr. Chairman, is it's 100% affordable. And that is a substantial benefit and a substantial gain in terms of where we are in terms of delivery of the local plan. So there's a planning balance here, Mr. Chairman, as the report sets out in the conclusion, in the final planning balance paragraphs, whereby there is a clear difference between whether there's a clear indication that you can come either way. The board can come either way. If you think that the affordable housing provision here is of such benefit to outweigh the harms, then clearly you can run with that, or vice versa. This is very, very finely balanced, this particular proposal. We've come down on one side. It is very, very open to members to come down on the other side. And if they do come down on the other side, it's my view that in fact there would not be an issue arising in terms of the appropriateness of that particular decision. This is really a matter of planning judgment and planning balance. And I'm quite prepared, Mr. Chairman, for the board to come up with a different decision here. I can see why they would do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Brown, in your report at item 5.3, it talks about the Portsmouth South Council's transport consultant and seeks to assure me that a summary of that has been proposed attached to Appendix D. I have to tell you, in my papers, I don't have Appendix D. I don't have appendices A, B, and C either. Is that germane to the report?
Apologies, Mr. Chairman. We'll have to sort that. We'll have to sort that. No, it's not, Mr. Chairman. The reason I say that is because the Highway Authority, which is the statutory Highway Authority, has no objection in principle. The Parish Council's transport consultant also agreed with the Highway Authority that there was no objection in principle. So therefore they are aligned, and therefore that would not change anything that I put down in the report, Mr. Chairman.
And were there other appendices that should have been attached?
The other appendices, Mr. Chairman, there should have been the location plan is Appendix A, street scenes are Appendix B.
I have the location plan and the street scene.
Yeah. I don't know, Mr. Chairman, without going back through it. There's nothing else in terms of what I need to show you tonight in terms of the determination. You have the layout, you have the street scenes, and those are the key things, Mr. Chairman. If there's another appendix involved, it would not have shown anything different than you have tonight.
Mr. Tobin?
Chair, my advice would generally be in a situation like this that members should be certain that they've had sight of everything that may be relevant. And whilst accepting what Mr. Brown says, that it may not change much, the fact that they're referred to and haven't been produced is something that members should take into consideration and should see before making a decision in this matter.
Members, I have seen the papers, and I know what it says, but my apologies, I didn't realise until the meeting started that it wasn't in my copy. I don't know if it's just my copy, or have you all got Appendix D and I'm just the lucky one who didn't get it.
Can I suggest that we defer this?
That's entirely my view, Councillor Lerwick. I apologise to our speakers. I should have been more aware of this than perhaps I was, but I think it would be unsafe to proceed without seeing Appendix D as it's referred to in the report. I entirely accept Mr. Brown's comments, given having previously seen what Appendix D says. I generally don't believe it would. But I don't think it's safe to proceed. Councillor Hayfield?
Hear what you say, as they say. Is there any reason, therefore, why we shouldn't actually hear what our speakers are going to say? Because they come here to.
I think that would be entirely reasonable. Both of our speakers are on Teams.
So if we hear what they say, and then we can choose to defer it if we want to.
Yeah. So first off, our speaker is Linda Roberts. Linda Roberts, I'll give you the opportunity to speak now. I'll come to a further meeting if you would wish to. But at the end of all this, we are going to defer the issue until members can see Appendix D. Would you like to speak now or come to the next meeting?
I'd like to speak now.
Thank you very much. Well, in that case, you are very welcome to the meeting. And I'm sure it'll become a great surprise to hear that Mr. Tobin will talk to you next. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening. As with the other speakers, I'll let you know when your time starts. You'll have 3 minutes to address the board. I'll let you know when you have 1 minute remaining and when your time starts.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I'd like to thank Jeff Brown for his report, and the residents note his opinion that this proposed development will cause them and the village significant harm. The plans show a perfect world where there is no on-street parking and no interference between vehicles or pedestrians. Residents live in the real world. On-street parking at the junction of Ostry Road and Curlew Close and around the bend of Curlew Close will pose an increasing difficulty for the 300% increase in traffic that this development will create. The entrance to the development is too close to Green Acres, number 14, and issues with misleading signals will occur. The residents believe that the councillors visited the site last week and would have experienced these difficulties for themselves. We hope you will bear this in mind when you make your decision. We are also delighted to note that the waiting list for social housing has significantly decreased from the 67 people advised when I asked for a Freedom of Information request, which is dated the 18th of June 2020, to the 37 borough residents now waiting. The impact of the Hatters development, which completed last year, has had a significant impact on waiting numbers. Construction is ongoing on the Bellway estate, which will provide 40 homes for social housing, and this year construction has started at Elms Farm and at the rear of Little Wharton Road, and these 2 sites will provide an additional 24 homes. Construction on land opposite 84 to 104 Orton Road is expected to start soon, and this will provide a further 28 homes. Therefore, a total of 92 homes for social housing are already on their way. The existing provision for the 37 local residents on the waiting list is already more than adequately catered for in the short and medium period, and the residents believe that the need for more social housing in this unsuitable location in a village lacking adequate public transport and medical provision, and where the primary school is oversubscribed and even will continue to be oversubscribed when the existing 106 provision has been used, and where we're experiencing an increasing number of severe traffic accidents, particularly at Barn End Road and Orton Road Junction, that this application is not warranted, and we urge the council to reject it. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, any questions for our speaker? In which case, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Baggott. Mr. Baggott, welcome to the meeting. I'm sure you've heard what we said before. I'd give you the same opportunity. Would you like to speak now or later? I have to say to both speakers, you actually have the same chance to come back and speak a second time as the board will be discussing it. But Mr. Baggett, over to you.
Thank you.
So would you like to speak tonight or?
I would, Chair. Yes, please.
Well, then you're very welcome to the meeting, and I'm sure you will be surprised that Mr. Tobin will explain how that works. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening. As with the other speakers, you'll have 3 minutes to address the board, so I'll let you know when the time starts, when you have a minute remaining and when that time is ended. The time starts now.
Good evening. My name is Michael Baggett of Platform Housing Group. I'm here to speak in support of the application. If you're not aware, Platform Housing is a not-for-profit housing association created following the merger of Waterloo Housing Group and Fortis Living. We currently hold 48,000 properties, of which 766 are in North Warwickshire, and we have a long history of working closely with district councils to provide new affordable housing. On this occasion, we've worked in partnership with the applicant in the hope of delivering a landscape-led, low-density scheme of 28 new homes, including 6 bungalows, of which 100% will be affordable housing. These homes would contribute towards the identified unmet housing need within Wharton and would be supported by Homes England grant funding. In North Warwickshire, in the village of Wharton more specifically, there's areas of significant housing demand, in particular in regards to the need of additional affordable housing. As of April 2022, there were 41 applicants on the council's waiting list in need of affordable rented homes in the village of Wharton. Although other developments have been approved in Wharton, which would have contributed to meeting unset need, this remains the up-to-date residual figure of need, and no current allocated land is available to meet this lead. Furthermore, the housing officer has pointed out that this is an underestimation of need because it only includes those seeking affordable rented accommodation. It does not include those seeking to access the housing ladder through affordable home ownership. And when we talk about affordable housing, we're talking about homes for people who cannot afford to buy privately or indeed rent privately. The housing officer has confirmed that the mix of homes that are proposed would align with the identified need, so the scheme fully accords with the borough's local plan LP9 in meeting new affordable housing need. It is confirmed by the planning officer that substantial weight should be given and should not be underestimated in the decision making of this application. As mentioned towards the end of the officer's report, the approval of this application is a matter for planning judgment, and their recommendation has been reached on planning. However, a different outcome is possible if members choose to attribute greater weight to the much needed provision of affordable housing. It cannot be underestimated how life-changing a new affordable home can be for a local person who may otherwise not be able to live in the village. As a housing association, we are acutely aware and witness daily the huge impact having a safe, warm and affordable home can have on people's lives, acting as more than just a roof over a personal family's heads, but a springboard for other opportunities and successes in life. In conclusion, Platform and the applicant have worked hard to bring forward the best possible scheme, which, if delivered, would provide much needed affordable housing to the area. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Baggett. Members, do you have any questions for our speaker? In that case, Mr. Baggett, thank you very much indeed. So, members, I'm now going to propose that we defer further consideration of this application until we have a copy of Appendix D or any others that we're missing. You are perfectly at liberty to vote against my recommendation if you feel that you have all of the information which is relevant. But in my view, to do so, I personally think it would be unsafe as a decision if you haven't seen an appendix which is referred to in the agenda. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. All those in favour of deferral? And any against? Thank you. That's deferred and will appear on the agenda for our next meeting. We now move to application number 239 for land between 3 and 7 Meadow Gardens, Battersby Enza. Mr. Mark Ashford has indicated he would like to speak. Mr. Ashford, if you could stand by while Mr. Brown introduces his report. Mr. Brown.
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to run through the plans, the site here is outlined in red, as you can see, off Meadow Gardens, the access itself off Meadow Gardens, when surrounding development. And then in terms of layout, that's what we have. Again, that's a replication from the committee report. Moving on through, then house types throughout the estate. The yellow there shows you the open space. and again, some more house types all the way through, very similar. These are all in the report, Mr. Chairman, with some variation in terms of elevation, some with render and some not. So, Mr. Chairman, again, it's a very full report. Members have also undertaken a site visit here, and they've had a good look on site and around the site. They've looked at the access, and in fact, they've also visited another development undertaken by the same developer with very similar layout and very similar house types, in order to gauge the impact of the development and also the impact on the setting of the development. A lot of work has been undertaken, Mr. Chairman, to achieve a layout which we feel, from a planning and highway point of view, is satisfactory. And the recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is one of support.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Mr. Ashford, welcome to the meeting. Mr. Tobin will explain the rules to you, and he'll speak to you next. Mr. Tobin.
Good evening, Mr. Ashford.
Good evening.
3 minutes in which to address the board, so I'll let you know when your time starts, when you have a minute remaining, and then when that time is on.
Okay. We've kept our list of concerns fairly simple and almost bullet point. The main points we've got is current access is along the entire length of our home. Already we've had the driveway obstructed where we couldn't park from the developer. On top of that, we've already had some damage to the side of our property on the drive, which is another problem. And one of the biggest points that we're concerned about is the fact that we're on a raised elevation to the development. So we would be looking from where the current planning is suggesting that we'd be above the fences at the end of any gardens, looking down into their gardens and homes, which it just seems that due to the planning, we're 3 meadow gardens, obviously at the top of the schematic you showed just, and the distance between us and them, which is right across the legal access we have, just seems far too close for a dwelling to be next to a new building site. So we've got security concerns of the gates on the property have already been left open numerous amount of times, which we've had to sort out ourselves. We've tried to contact Mr. Fitzpatrick a number of times and had no joy with that. And as a new development in itself, we're supportive of new developments, but we feel that the current addresses need to be respected a little bit with how it's going to come about and what spacing there is to the development, such as 3 and I think 17 Meadow Gardens is the other one at the bottom. And we'd look to seek further spacing between the development and current properties which are affected, which is number 3 and number 17 as it stands. And that's most of our issues with it at the moment.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ashford, any questions for our speaker? Councillor Bell.
Thank you. The problems that you've outlined at the moment, are they to do just with the construction?
The problems at the moment, what we've listed, are mainly personal problems. We're quite supportive of development on a whole. It's just that we feel on a personal note that there's been no consideration for the elevation of our property, which is probably 3-4 feet above the land that's been developed, and the spacing between that and the safety aspects of having a young family and heavy machinery literally coming past our home with no gates.
Any other questions? Mr. Ashford, I'm not sure if you'll have it with you or if you will have seen it, but condition 5 of the recommendation includes a requirement for an environmental management plan, and we also have a construction management plan.
Mm-hmm.
That sort of will govern the way the contractor has to behave on site. And
I've spoke to one of the directors of the group, and he assured me we'd at least have a discussion in the meantime. And this was some months ago when they were first doing tests, and I have tried to contact the company and I've had no contact back. I've left emails, phone calls haven't been answered, and it's okay saying that, but we've probably there is no separation between our side wall of the house that we live in at the moment and the plot of land being developed, other than 1 metre of legal right of way, which isn't protected at the moment by any sort of structure.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Brown, what can we do about this?
Well, I was just thinking about that, Mr. Chairman, as you were speaking, because clearly the conditions that there are conditions that, in terms of construction, which is the general construction of the layout of the site. It doesn't specifically address Mr. Ashford's problem. What we can do, Mr. Chairman, is add a condition. We've done this in the past, where we've actually asked the developer to look at retaining features between when land is higher on an existing development and a development site. And that's what will have to happen here. There'll have to be some degree of retaining structure because of the issues that Mr. Ashford has outlined. So therefore,
but we'd also be seeking some sort of, at the moment, it's very difficult to see in the plans, but it doesn't look much more than 1 metre from our boundary, as in our external wall, to where the houses are going to be started, the bottom of the gardens. And with new builds, things being much smaller now, we would literally be looking into people's living rooms and gardens from being 4 feet higher.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions for our speaker? Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Mr. Ashford. We will certainly follow up with this. Members, any comments on proposals? Councillor Wiley.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just ask for clarification on the matter of developer contributions? I'm just reading page 44 of 73, which lists a series of draft contributions from both North Watford Borough Council and Warwickshire County Council. I take it those figures are general. That being a site of social housing from the parish council, we're advised that there would be no developer contributions.
So I'm looking at page 5G of 136, which I'm looking at the same.
Yes, it is.
And that deals with the 1 or 6 contributions, Mr. Brown?
Under paragraph draft section 1 of 6 contributions, those are the contributions that have been asked by those various agencies. But as you can see from the report, the development would not be viable with those developments, and therefore the benefit of having 100% affordable outweighs those particular contributions, and that's the reason why the report has not contained a recommendation about there being a 106.
Councillor Hayfield.
I think this is basically a supportable application. And it seems from what Mr. Brown has been saying, there are opportunities to assist the speaker in some of his concerns during the construction. And on that basis, I'll move the recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll say more or less the same thing. I think I'm happy to support the recommendation, but I think we need to look in detail at what the speaker said. And there seems to have some genuine concerns, and I'm sure that they could be overcome with some regulation, I think. And I'm not quite sure that at the moment, but I think his concerns ought to be taken into consideration. I'm happy to second the recommendation, Chair.
So, councillors, can I, sorry to question, but are you moving approval or minded to support?
Approval.
Approval subject to additional conditions to overcome the objectors' concerns. And about Councillor Wiley's concerns about Section 106 funding?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just for clarification, as I understand it, Mr. Brown's advice is that there will be no 106.
Yeah, that's so I saw another hand on Councillor Humphries.
Yeah, I'm a bit concerned that there's no 106 because I believe I've met these developers before, and conditions in a lot of cases were not applied to. And I've had a lot, and if I'm correcting what I'm thinking there, the early morning calls on Sundays, late calls in the evening when they're not supposed to be working. Those need to be stronger than just conditions, because if I am correct, I think we're going to have to hold the developer closer to the fire than just writing a condition of which he'll say apologise after the event. Thank you.
Are you proposing a deferment, Councillor?
One of the reasons I am concerned that he's quite happy to build houses, but not happy to deal with leisure, education, or you know, how tight is. I mean, I'm not sure how the process works when they say they can't afford to make a contribution for 106. Who verifies that? Who audits the fact? Because those houses are going to need to support the community, not just with housing, but everything that goes with it. Thank you.
Mr. Brown, did we get a view from the district valuer, or is this an internal assessment?
It's an internal assessment, Mr. Chairman. We did not go to the district valuer. And in fact, the development that took place in Rawdon, which Councillor Humphreys has indicated, also had contributions requested, and contributions were not accepted in the final decision.
So, members, I have a proposal for approval subject to certain additional conditions to try to overcome the our speaker's concern. Do I have any other proposal?
Well, could I say to you, the only proposal, I would like something stronger than conditions, because I had people become very ill as a result of the pressure put on them when things happen at different times. And these words, if you like, are easy. Say that you'll do it, and the following weekend the same thing happens, etc. And I just wouldn't want that to be passed on to the residents in Baddesley.
I absolutely hear what you're saying. There's the only way to get there is a deferment.
But then I would propose a deferment while it's discussed.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder for deferment? Seconded. So, members, we have two.
I'm happy to withdraw mine.
Councillor Hayfield. For the benefit of the tape, Councillor Hayfield, are you withdrawing your recommendation?
I've been out and maneuvered, haven't I?
No, not at all. You have a recommendation. You just need another seconder, that's all. Does anybody else wish to second, Councillor?
Could you just refresh me on where we are with this?
Okay, we have two separate recommendations. One is to defer for further information as regards the objector's concerns, and potentially to reassure you on section 106 agreements. The alternative recommendation, which is that we grant it subject to conditions. So I now have two proposals. We will take.
Can I just a bit of additional information? And so, outside the implementation of planning conditions to ensure that we mitigate any potential residential impact, is there anything else that we can do? Chair, I withdraw. I'm prepared to support council because I have no experience of these people. But if he has experience of these developers and they're that way inclined, then I think we need to tie them down to some tighter schedule, some tighter agreements. I don't want that situation that Councillor Humphreys described as happening somewhere else happening again. And I think if these people are doing that, then and we let them get away with it once or twice, they get away with it more often.
Yeah.
So I think,
may I just say that I have.
I'm sorry, I can't speak again. I do apologise, but you only got 3 minutes, and I'm sorry.
That's where I stand anyway.
Councillor Hayfield.
I'll stand down by recommendation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jarvis.
Can I just ask a question for Mr. Brown? What is that is stronger than a condition?
First of all, in general terms, Mr. Chairman, I'd advise you that your board, you cannot speculate as to what might happen. You may have had experience of developers in the past, but you cannot speculate they will undertake the same, have the same experience on this particular site, and to single out a developer for particular harder conditions would be totally wrong and disproportionate. In my view, we have the standard planning conditions, which are a construction management plan, which are standard to all developers, and that's the line that we should be following. If there are potential breaches of those conditions, then we will have to investigate, and we will have to issue breach of conditions notices, and we will have them to go to court. That's the proper procedure in this particular case, not to speculate about what might happen.
So, I understand this, but I'm conscious that we're going round in circles here. I didn't hear speculation. I heard a member talking about concerns and asking for further information. Anybody else wish to speak?
Chair, can I just simply ask one point? Whilst hearing what Mr. Brown said, arguably, the Section 106 agreement would be wide enough to impose restrictions or requiring operations or activities to be carried out or the development carried out in a particular way, which is different to a planning condition, but is enforceable in a different way. As Mr. Brown said, a planning condition is enforceable having assessed what may or may not actually happen in the future, and is enforced by means of a notice which has a criminal sanction if not complied with. So in that respect, a condition would be stronger in terms of the enforcement options in the Section 106 agreement, just saying agree to do this. And of course, that would need the agreement of the developer to enter into that agreement. So I don't think you would gain much, if anything at all, from going down that route rather than just having planning conditions.
Thank you very much. Again, I hear what you say, but I think the recommendation says a construction management plan to be agreed. I think members are asking for more information about what would be in the construction management plan. I saw Councillor Hancock's first and then Councillor.
Personally, I think we've come here to look at planning applications. The planning application looks fine. It looks acceptable. I understand there's concerns, but that's why we have planning enforcement. That's why we have conditions. We need housing. It's in a development area. I think we just need to get on with our jobs. And for me, I am still proposing to follow through and accept this application.
Councillor Derrick?
Mine was a question really, is there anything further that we can add to this condition to make sure that there is a conversation between the applicants and the speaker to make sure that his concerns are considered?
Okay, so I've got two proposals. I'll take deferment first because if you vote for one, then you're voting against the other. So can I see those in favour of deferment? You count six. Those against deferment. That fails. So can I see a proposal of those in favour of granting consent? I had one from Councillor Hayfield. Is that still there?
Yeah, I'll second it still.
Yeah, okay. So proposed, seconded in favour of granting consent with additional conditions?
With conditions, additional conditions.
Those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Thank you very much. Mr. Dunn, can you contact the objector and explain how we'll proceed from here? Thank you very much. We now move on, members, to the next item of business, which is that under Section 100A, Section 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, that the rest of the meeting be held in private session. Those in favour? Thank you very much. We'll just wait a couple of minutes to stop broadcasting.